Okay, we're recording. And 1, 2, 3, live.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday night. It is 7 o'clock, just after, in the UK. There's a reason I say in the UK, because this is truly an international evening. And I'm not just talking about Lisa in Scotland, or are you in Westminster? But you represent a Scottish constituency, so it is already international. I want to welcome everyone for tuning in tonight. Everyone's got stuff to do, so we're, as always with APDAWG, we're thankful for sharing your evening with us. Luckily, because I send out all the newsletters, I don't really have to update you about anything for the whole year, which is thankful, because a lot's gone on, as you well know. But thanks for the positive feedback for the newsletters. Tonight we're going to have an incredible night. It is packed with loads of stuff. I want to say a few thank yous to start with. Thank you to the UK Centre for Animal Law, especially Tiffany and Paula, for helping organise all the technicalities behind the scenes, and also Our Dogs newspaper for bringing us to the attention of our very, very special guest speaker tonight. If you want to tweet tonight, go for it. Use the hashtag APDAWG, APDAWG. Please just say nice things. And we'll obviously retweet all the nice ones. One thing I've got to tell you all, if you want to interact, then please put your questions and comments in the Q&A box and not the chat box, and we will get to them. We are honoured not only to have the amazing Lisa Cameron MP with us tonight, but also our amazing patron, Peter Egan. They'll both be saying a few words in a sec. But really, tonight is all about this international collaboration. And I say collaboration, that's the second time I've said it, and it will be said a lot more times tonight. And if you're at home tonight and you've still got some booze left from 2 lockdowns, then a drinking game you can do is every time we say collaboration, you can do a little shot. Just makes it a little bit more fun. But what I'm saying is, in Canada, we have this very, very special guest, Dr. Brenda Bonnett, a fellow veterinary surgeon. And we're even more honoured to have her because where she lives, near the Great Lakes, they were forecasting some snowstorms and winds, and there was a big question mark whether the internet would actually work. So she's there, she's safe, the ceiling looks intact, so we're ready to go. Brenda Bonnett is no stranger to her own native breeds, Labradors, Newfoundlands, Nova Scotia duck-tiling retrievers, but even more so, she understands the power of positive collaboration, especially with regard to dog welfare, which we're going to look at tonight. We're also going to be chatting to a few of our APDAWG's favourite campaigners, Dan Allen, the Greyhound campaign, also Michelle from DOTS, and getting some collaboration tips. And interestingly, on the news earlier, one collaboration that's happening already that's affecting all of our lives is, of course, the vaccine collaboration, which the whole world is getting involved with, which is really important. So collaboration, really important. And we're going to end the session with presenting the Philippa Robinson Award for Dog Welfare, which in the past has gone to Owen and Hatchie and Eileen from Friends of Animals Wales. So it's a really big evening for everyone. So before we pass on to Lisa, I just want to invite our patron, Peter Bear, to say a few words. And we're honoured, as always, to have him with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Mark. And of course, I'm honoured to be our patron for APDAWG and to be in part of this great company. I think collaboration is vital, of course, and I think the best way to understand how to collaborate and the great success of collaboration is for anyone listening to this who hasn't, or watching this who hasn't, to read your wonderful book on Lucy's Law, which achieved the most, it achieved the most important piece of legislation regarding animal welfare in the last 15 years. So it was sensational. So anyone who is really interested in collaboration should have a read of that. Read it anyway, because it's a marvelous book. But also, what I think is very important about us individuals, because people often say to me, I mean, I'm connected to about 25 different charities, and people email me a lot or text me a lot and say, I'm just one voice, what can I do? And I always say, your voice is as important as my voice. So, you know, allow your voice, share it as much as you can, share it with all of your friends. And also, I think one of the most important pieces of collaboration is when we all collaborate with the kindness within our soul. And that is what drives us, that is what feeds our compassion. And it's our kindness and our compassion that actually keeps us going in this very, very important world of animal rights and animal welfare. So I would say, listen to your soul, let your kindness speak, and support charities. They all need your help, and it can be one that you just choose near to you. Just support, just give them help and support. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter, and appreciate the plug. That check obviously reached you in time. I will now introduce our phenomenal chair, the fantastic Lisa Cameron, to say a few words and also to introduce Dr. Bonnett.
Thank you so much, Mark and Peter and everybody who has joined us tonight. I hope you can hear me okay. I've had some problems with Zoom this week, but hopefully the sound is picking up okay this evening. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with APDAWG again, even although it's a virtual meeting rather than our usual meeting at Westminster. But it's actually enabled so many people who may have not been able to come to Westminster in previous meetings to attend tonight. And as Mark said, it's therefore an absolutely international evening that we're having, which I think is wonderful and really enhances the work that we are doing across the House of Commons and across the UK in terms of dog welfare. Just a little update from some of the work that we've been doing in the House of Commons. I had a question to the Minister for Homelessness a couple of weeks ago, and she has now agreed to meet with our dogs on the street and myself and APDAWG so that we can discuss the importance of ensuring that when homelessness provision is taken forward across London, across the UK, that it's providing care for those homeless people who maybe only have a dog as a companion, and that's their lifeline, but often are then denied a place in a shelter because you know, they may not accept pets. So we want to change that. We want to facilitate that. If you are a caring and compassionate individual who happens to find yourself out on the street with your pet dog, that you have access to the provision that you should have as well. So that's just a short update from some of the work that we've been doing in Parliament. And I'm going to get straight into the agenda. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to introduce Dr. Bonnett, who qualified as a vet in 1979, completed her PhD in epidemiology at the University of Guelph in Canada. Her research in Europe and North America has involved numerous species and disciplines, including theriogenology, breed-specific health risks, human-animal interactions, and medical communication. Wow. As CEO of the non-profit International Partnership for Dogs, Dr. Bonnett's key goal is to build capability across the entire dog world, promoting the big picture of health and welfare by connecting the dots to meet a whole range of complex challenges. However, with so many stakeholders in this often complicated world of dog health and welfare, we must all first and foremost start with our own personal responsibilities if we want to encourage change. And encouraging change is what this all-party parliamentary group is about. We've been working, as Peter said, on Lucy's Law. We've been working you know, with Dr. Dan. We really have created change, but we're always encouraging change, and that's why it's a pleasure to have another change creator, Dr. Bonnett, join us tonight. Her presentation will be followed by an interactive chat, as Mark said, for those who have an interest in the current challenges in the dog world. So thank you for being here with us this evening. And now over to yourself, Dr. Brenda Bonnett. Okay, so we've got the presentation.
First and foremost, thanks to everybody at APDAWG, everybody at APDAWG, and the UK Centre for Animal Law for making this webinar happen. And thanks to all the attendees for joining us. And with that, let's start talking about reframing discussions on dog health and welfare, what's needed for progress. I assume most of you know I'm Brenda Bonnett, a Canadian veterinarian and epidemiologist. I have a long history and career working in animal health and welfare as a researcher, educator, now as CEO of the International Partnership for Dogs. I have a long association with Sweden, with the Agri Insurance Company and the Swedish Kennel Club, looking at breed-specific statistics on health and disease. And this work, many collaborators have contributed to the development of IPFD and a lot of our work. Today, I'll just thank Ian Seath, who is directly responsible for helping me with the roadmap we're going to present later. Let's start by talking about who is included in these discussions. All stakeholders that we feel have a stake in dog health and welfare, including kennel clubs and breed clubs and regulators, the public and individual consumers, researchers, academics, veterinarians, pet industry, the welfare sector, and any other producers and distributors. And hopefully many are represented on the call today, and we'll see that in the discussions, hopefully. So why now? Why now do we need to reframe our discussions? All of you are aware of many challenges in dog health and welfare, and many positive things have happened, but there's also been challenges. So you've heard of veterinary petitions in a couple of countries over the last few years, expanding legislation from many countries. And some of these efforts have led to confrontation versus collaboration. And we'd like to find ways to be more collaborative in our actions. Lots of discussion on social media can be good, but you know, there's also an outrage culture, strong language, negative personal attacks, people feel vulnerable, and this doesn't promote good collective activities. And in fact, we tend to hear from people at the extremes on social media, and we really need to engage people from the middle. And so we're going to ask each of you to step up, even if you're in the middle. And all of this, are we on a slippery slope with a big snowball coming at us? Are there unintended consequences of some of this? That's what we're going to talk about over the next little while. So instead, perhaps we can promote collective and collaborative efforts for common goals, open, respectful dialogue, have discussions based on evidence and understanding and a little less on emotion, and profile the many positives about dogs and people so that all our conversations are not driven by problems. What's needed for progress then? What are our goals for today's discussion? Well, we want to highlight the big picture and connect the dots of complex issues, not the complexities just of the health issues, but also of communication challenges. Identify some benefits of inclusive and collaborative rather than unilateral efforts, and identify individual, organizational, and collective responsibilities. We want to reach out to those who might be willing to embrace dialogue and collective and collaborative approaches, and hope they agree with us that together we're stronger with better outcomes. But of course, we have to also look at barriers that impact possible solutions, and that involves situations, attitudes, and more. We want to start a roadmap to achieving goals for dog health and welfare. And this is a call to action for the goods of dogs and people together. Why are you hearing this from IPFD? We are an international multi-stakeholder organization. We have an aim to bring the dog world together and to move from information and collaboration to action. Hopefully you've seen our platform, dogwellnet.com. There's a wealth of information there on many issues, tools, etc. Genetics, brachycephalics, and our reframing document is there if you haven't read it already. We have the International Dog Health Workshops every second year. The last one was in the spring of 2019, hosted by the Kennel Club in Windsor, where we bring together decision leaders from all stakeholder groups to try and promote collective actions. Our focus is on health, well-being, and welfare of pedigree dogs, other purpose-bred dogs, and all dogs. And we have a focus on human-animal interactions. Well, let's talk just for a minute about actions. We tell people to think globally and act locally because, of course, your local situation is of key priority to you, but you fit into the global dog picture. Nationally and internationally, there's been many commissions, reports, blogs, educational activities, legislative activities on many issues, including breed-specific health issues. And we can say, have there been meaningful, substantive, and measurable outcomes? As I'll talk a little bit later, it may depend on your point of view, whether things have been enough and fast enough. And on that issue, we've been working on a chapter on international brachycephalic efforts for a textbook out of RVC. And brachycephalics have been on the veterinary radar for over 50 years. So the time frame is worth thinking about and looking at. This is a graph of AKC registrations for French Bulldogs 1970 to 2017. Similar logarithmic increases have been seen in many countries. So the popularity of these dogs has exploded, while many campaigns and educational and research efforts have gone on to inform people about health issues in these breeds and short lifespans. Other great research by Rowena Packer and others on people's attitudes about these dogs, and we start to understand that when they're getting these dogs, their priority is not health, and in fact, they normalize health issues as typical for the breed. So many challenges to getting the message across to people, and this dog, I took her picture when I was in Chicago, a dog compromised not only by its breed and conformation, but also by the fact that it's obese. So why are some of our concerted efforts just not getting through to people? It has been suggested to me, maybe by devil's advocates, that maybe it's time to say that is it that people don't know about health problems in dogs, or do they just not care? And that has to be looked at a little bit carefully, because we have to define what care means, because maybe they don't care in the same way as everybody else. But there have been suggestions that in trying to eliminate smoking, it moved from raising awareness to true education, providing statistics, and eventually into legislation, restrictions, and even shaming. And the point of looking at this is to say who and how decisions get made about promoting health and welfare improvements has to be considered, especially if we're not sure we're making the progress that we hope to see. So another goal today is to move into the future with specific plans. If we're going to have a roadmap, we have to understand where we're starting from, where we want to go, and of course, who is or should be coming along for the ride. So we have this wide group of stakeholders. Think we agree that we need to talk to each other, that the problems of health and welfare are complex enough that together we're stronger. But maybe what we really need to do is to start by listening to each other. So definitions of words matter, and we're going to go through how there's a spectrum of diversity for terms, approaches, attitudes that bear on how we move forward on dog health and welfare. So if we have a spectrum, we might say health is the absence of disease, and some legislative programs in Europe have suggested that breeders should not sell any dog that might have a health problem. Well, that's a little unrealistic. Maybe we should be talking about the absence of preventable disease or an acceptable level of disease. And then we have to talk about rate and risk, and is it numbers or risk relative to other breeds. And because of confusion of how we talk about quantifying disease even, we may not be as effective as we want to be. Welfare, of course, we could call that good welfare is the total absence of pain and suffering. But again, who lives their life totally free of any kind of suffering? And maybe we should be focusing on adequate or acceptable welfare. But the point is, it's not black and white. Not everybody agrees on this. And these terms have to be clarified. And we run into problems if we generalize too much across diseases, across breeds, across regions, because there's so much diversity. So this attempt to simplify sometimes leads to unintended consequences. And in all of this work, we have to think about supporting good human-animal interactions. People are part of everything to do with pets. And so the complexity of the human-animal interaction has to be considered. We think there's some kind of spectrum or balance between what's good for people, what's good for pets, but how do we achieve that? We've seen with the pandemic puppies, this incredible increase in people getting puppies. Sources of these puppies may be questionable. Prices have gone through the roof. But the real reason behind this is, of course, the people and what they want, far more than what might be good for dogs. This isn't right or wrong. It's just we have to accept that this balance influences the success of anything we try to do, etc. So let's talk some more about the spectrum of roles and relationships between people and dogs that may be very different regionally and culturally. So again, we have a spectrum. Some people, some places identify dogs as sentient beings that have rights. Some people would push that to the point where dogs' rights should be basically equal to those of humans. On the other side, we have people and regions that consider dogs as property or chattels, and the owner decides about ownership issues, about breeding issues, etc., possibly within some limit of actual abuse. In America, no, in the United States and in Europe, there is a focus on trade and business, and people's livelihoods may come above the rights of individual animals. So across the spectrum, maybe we're talking about from dominion over animals to stewardship for animals, but everyone who's working in this area needs to be very clear in their own mind where they exist on each of these spectrums. And when we're communicating or doing collaborative work or designing interventions, we need to think about the target group for those interventions and where people are on those levels. And our efforts will be much better if we're at least clear and honest and aware, I would say. Talking a little bit about the possible spectrum of collaborators, we have campaigners, welfare organizations, informed politicians, and others who promote excellent dog health and welfare. Perhaps they put the dogs first, but they also honor human-animal human-dog interactions. And there's those in the pedigree world, for example, in the show community, truly committed to health and welfare, acknowledge there are issues that need to be addressed, and they take responsibility and want to maintain the best of everything in the pedigree world. Health is important to them. Both of these groups passionately committed to their beliefs, even though their beliefs aren't the same. And they may differ more on the magnitude and urgency of the problems rather than the problems per se. So that's another aspect in our planning. But all these people truly care about dogs, and they care about dog people. These people could be collaborators, even though they constitute a spectrum. At the far ends of the spectrum, I'm going to just call these people crusaders. That might be extreme animal rights people, that might even be against dog ownership. Perhaps there's some in the extremes of the dog show world who think humans and their hobby come first, and health is secondary. Regardless what they're saying, their actions may indicate that. And if that's the case, and some of them are promoting true anti-dog legislation, or others are denying any responsibility for problems beyond their own dogs and feel collectively society doesn't have a say, then maybe these people will not be part of our audience for collective and collaborative actions. And what we need to do is accept that we need to focus on the people who want to participate. Another spectrum or range that I think is important to this discussion is the human behavior change wheel, and the processes people go to as they're changing a behavior for themselves or their animals or whatever. And this says that people start in a state of pre-contemplation. They may not realize there's a problem, and then they move into contemplation. Yeah, I think maybe I should do something. Preparation, they get ready. Action, they actually do something. Maintenance means they keep it going. And then, of course, there's the possibility for relapse, and they may start again at pre-contemplation. But we hope that with the right support, people will continue in a cycle of behavior change for whatever problem they're trying to make a difference in. If we view that as a spectrum, people who we want to interact with about dog health and welfare problems exist along a spectrum as well. Some are pre-contemplation, denial, no interest, or not ready for change. Some are already acting. They need support or facilitation or help with maintenance. They're already committed to the issues, and everything in between. If we think of applying some sort of legislation or regulations to a specific health or welfare problem and don't consider the target audience, we may say, well, we've got to go with the worst of the worst. There's people not denying there's even a problem. We're going to come up with some legislation that is restrictive or punitive because these people have refused to address the problem. The challenge then, of course, becomes, what if these legislative efforts then are also applied against people who get it? There's a problem, they're working on it, they're trying. What is going to be the impact on those people of restrictive or punitive regulations when they're already working on it, trying? It's not what they need to move them forward. And so this is one way in which we see unintended consequences of legislation or regulations when they aren't targeted appropriately for the group who needs them. So then sometimes the challenge isn't the legislation per se, but it's to whom it is enforced, and it's maybe not an appreciation of the diversity across this spectrum. So, looking at all this diversity, the spectrums that exist in terms of dogs and people and ethics and attitudes and laws and freedom and willingness to embrace change, Can appreciating this diversity help us to evaluate previous efforts and create new ones? Can it help us to move from this to this? And most importantly, what's your role? How are you going to evaluate, reevaluate, and participate going forward? So now we're going to do a couple of polling questions and have some discussion. So, great.
Just going to launch the polls, just one moment. Here we go, the poll is launched, so you can all participate in the poll.
So for this question, you can click all that apply in terms of your affiliations, because we know many people may wear more than one hat.
And if you just scroll down, you'll see question number 2 just below question 1, and that's just a single choice answer.
Tiffany, while people are asking, there's been a couple questions about how many people are attending.
Sorry,
Maybe we'll see that when the poll answers come up.
Yeah, it may do. Yeah, I can tell you all if you want. We are at 129.
Can you see when they're done or slowing down?
I think so, yeah. Yep, so it says 97 of 120. I assume it doesn't include the panelists. I'll just hang on for another few before I end it.
Oh, sorry. There's a few people we missed. Lawyers, yes, so we should have had legal in there. The lists get long.
We're at 106 of 120. Anybody else want a last chance to participate? Shall I end it?
Yes, I think so.
Fantastic.
Keep moving along.
There we go. And I'll share the results.
79% of you are dog owners, and only 11% breeders, 11% kennel club, a smattering of judges and veterinarians, lots of researchers, educators, only one actual regulatory politician person, and lots from welfare organizations. And I guess, oh, I can move that down. But we've got at least somebody in each of the categories, so that's great that that's represented. And we're talking a little bit to breeders, but not too much, so that's probably a balanced focus. So question number 2, this idea of where you are on a spectrum can be challenging, and I'm not sure these questions were exactly mutually exclusive. But I can't see the bottom one, Tiffany. I don't know if everybody else can. 42% dogs are sentient beings and the rights should stand on their own without regard to the desires of people. Some people saying it should be a little bit more about the dogs than the people. What do we got? 35% are in the middle. I can't see the bottom of the poll, Tiffany, so can you see what's there?
Sorry, Brenda, sorry about that. So, okay, so
I can see that D is 0%, but I can't see E. Or maybe there isn't an E.
There isn't, there's just D.
So this is interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the next presentation. But I think part of this distribution of attitudes about dogs is very much who's on the call. We have a lot of people from welfare organizations, and you're primarily, I guess, from Britain, although we have a few people from outside Britain. But it's also an example of a question probably where we might have bias because people aren't absolutely willing to be honest. I have been in many situations where I've worked with groups where they say it's all about the dogs, it's all about the dogs. But then when I look at their decision making, it's primarily about the people. Not saying that's wrong, just saying that's the way it is. And of course, I would say it's much more people oriented, for example, in the United States, where dogs really are considered property. So, but even this shows us the need to understand that not everybody feels the same way about it or the emphasis. And of course, for people who passionately believe that it should be about the dogs more than about the people, you tend to think everybody feels the same way. So this was just to highlight the range across people. Mark, Lisa, anybody, did you want to make a comment about the poll at all?
No, I find it fascinating how people's attitudes differ and how people are on different parts of the spectrum. And that is why collaboration is always so important. It's identifying as quickly as possible the common ground people share and then working on that as much as possible. And you find that it sucks a lot more people in once you have that core of activity going on. There's maybe a fear of missing out from a lot of people, but once that energy starts, it usually drags other people in with similar interests, and they tend to then want to compromise because they want to be part of the solution rather than the bystander. I don't know what Lisa thinks.
Yeah, but I also think that, you know, it's the people who come to our APDAWG meetings, you know, primarily have a focus on animal welfare and on dog welfare. So I think, you know, I think that that's totally representative of the people who come to our meetings to support the group. And we have a wide range, you can see, but we, you know, most people here, I would say, have animal welfare at, you know, the heart of everything they're doing. So I'm not sure if the polls here would be commensurate with the wider public polls, Brenda, or, you know, if it is just very cultural. If we're in the UK or the US or other areas in the world.
Right. I had a little trouble hearing you there, but I think the real take-home message is that when we hang out with people who feel the same as we do, we tend to think we're right, or we think everybody thinks that. And so if you're going to do collaboration, you can't start a collab, and I could tell you this from personal experience, can't start an international conversation by saying, well, obviously dogs are sentient beings, they have full rights of their own, and on that basis, let's move forward. You may disenfranchise people right at the beginning because they come from a place where that is not their stance. And one of the things that we've seen internationally is that the culture of a country affects welfare so much. So what they have done and can do in Sweden in breed health can't be done in a lot of other countries. Same for the UK. So what we need to do is share more about the context we're working in so people understand where we're coming from. No apologies, I mean, that's just the way it is, but we need that understanding. if there's no other comments on that, there was a couple of questions I thought I would refer to, and now there was one on dog attacks, which is, I can't really speak to that. There was one that said, what do you feel prevents people from moving from emotion to evidence? Is evidence based on how dogs behave in their environment, i.e. are happy, confident, appropriate in behavior? If not, then how are you measuring evidence? Well, as an epidemiologist, I tend to measure evidence based on science and studies and numbers, but of course I really push understanding the human side of it. But the issue that we run into with personal opinion is what I mentioned about the French bulldogs and the work Rowena Packer has done. So she's providing scientific evidence on the attitudes of people about their dogs, but it shows us that we may run into many people with compromised dogs who say, he's fine. Oh yes, sometimes when he runs to the door, he falls over in a faint, but that's just funny, or that's okay. Right? And so when people are individually interpreting whether their dog is happy, as a veterinarian, I've seen dogs that I thought were in extremis that their owners thought were okay because they wagged their tail. And we know how committed dogs are to supporting us. So when I talk about evidence, I talk more than personal opinion because we run into these issues. If we talk about why is it so hard for people to drop emotion, it's because partly, depending, somebody who's been breeding a breed for 35 years, it might be their livelihood, it's their hobby, and it's their personal identity. And so to stand up and say, we've bred these dogs badly and created sick dogs, that's not an easy thing for them to say. It affects their entire sense of self. And so that's another reason why, like what Peter said at the beginning, we have to have some kind of kindness and compassion. But then if we say, I think that the next question was sort of along the same lines. Yes, there was a question, what about the argument that caring for sick animals fulfills a human evolutionary need to be needed? Well, that's a very human, person-centric idea. So the picture of that pug that I shared, I was almost in tears. This dog was so obese and so challenged, and to me represented almost animal abuse. And the person at the end of the leash loved that dog probably more than herself. And she didn't see that there was anything wrong with the dog. And I'm sure that if I'd said to her, you know, by allowing your dog to be that fat, you are creating a welfare issue, she probably would have been destroyed. So we have this situation, if it's all about people, then people can have sick dogs and fat dogs, and if they can breed dogs that are pink with two heads and that makes them happy as people, then if it's just about people, it's okay. If it's all about the dogs, it's clearly not okay. If it's about some balance between people and dogs, that's when it becomes complex. Where do we draw that line between what's okay and not okay? Anybody else want to weigh in on emotion, evidence, or people versus dogs? And there was a question in the Q&A. Tiffany, can the attendees see the Q&A?
No, I can make it visible if you like me to.
You don't have to, but one of the things that we can send, there was a question as to whether we had statistics for the UK, and I sent the person a link to DogWellNet where we have an article on French bulldogs, and there are different country statistics in there. So when let's just remember to send that link to people when we send it out.
Yep, I can pop it in the chat now if you'd like me to.
Okay. How are we on time? Mark, are you the time Keeper?
Yeah, I think we're doing okay. We're just 3 minutes over, and I will just say one thing related to what you said earlier about when you start potentially a campaign and people feel like they're left out or haven't got anything to do with it, or maybe disenfranchised. Sometimes people just need time to do their own research and realize what's going on, and my point is, I guess, never use that as a reason to stop doing what you're doing, but just be sensitive and give them time to come on board when it's ready for them, rather than trying to force them or just giving up on them. If that makes any sense. People get there in their own time often.
Right, and that's part of what I was talking about, that where we might have to let some people go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And somebody has also asked the question, do we need to be wary of collaboration sinking to the level of the lowest common denominator to please everyone all the time? And certainly that can be an issue, as can be the issue of let's go after the worst of the worst. But the worst of the worst, as you say, Mark, they might just not be ready, right? So
Yep.
if we focus all our efforts there, they may not be fruitful. And the discussion on the human behavior change, I did a presentation for the Human Behavior Change Conference in Dorking, which is a great city, but you can't say it without saying Dorking. Anyway, a few years ago, and I talked about designing health programs for the right group. So kennel clubs sometimes don't even realize, somebody says we should have a really good program for people that are already doing health testing and following the health strategies to move to the next step. And somebody else says, no, we should spend our time trying to get the people that wouldn't say it this way, that are pre-contemplation. Let's get the deniers and get them working. Well, these are two such separate groups that you might both have really good ideas for projects, but it's not that one project is better than the other. You're targeting a totally different group of people. So there has to be this understanding, do we want to support the people that are already on that behavior change wheel, already working, and make their work that much more effective and support them? Or is the biggest need to get the deniers on the wheel? And I mean, hopefully some of both, but it's just a thing that you have to weigh that balance. But I like that suggestion that if all we do on social media is scream about the worst of the worst without finding a forum for the best of the best and the medium best and the people in the middle and the quiet ones to have a forum to show what they're doing, we may miss out. So that's a good comment. That's sort of where I was going with what I was talking about.
Mark?
Yeah.
Sorry, just want to make just one observation on some of those points very shortly. And I think the key to this, in my mind, is having a funnel for some of these various campaigns, because there has to be an element with collaboration of prioritization, and there has to be a process by which policy decisions can be adequately informed by both science and ethics, as well as the views of the individuals who have different perspectives on all of these issues. And I think what's going to be really important across different countries is the mechanisms that are put in place for political representation of animals. It looks as if Scotland may have got this right, setting up an animal welfare commission so that individuals who have concerns or campaigners who have concerns can feed that to the commission. The commission has the power to take on board different issues, decide a prioritisation of the issues to look at, and then to do a report and feed that to the Scottish Government. And so I think looking at those systems for political representation can't be overlooked as part of this wider conversation we're having as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's why APDAWG has come into its own, really, because it's provided a platform where we receive lots of emails and then we can actually discuss them in time with experts and try and make progress that way.
That's right, and some problems are more pressing than others, and including the dog import problem, because it affects the largest number of dogs in the worst possible way. So we also have to be strategic about what issues we're putting in front of government to address, and not having a scattergun approach.
Absolutely right. So Tiffany, if you're there, let's go for the second presentation.
Excellent. I will share. Bear with me. There we go.
So we've had some positive examples of collaborative efforts, and this is just a reminder to say that even if this love for dogs and care about their health and welfare exists along a long spectrum, and if individuals and groups along that spectrum each enact their own efforts, we should, through open dialogue, be able to tie this together into coordinated actions in the best interests of dogs and people. So a reminder that these are complex problems, issues of health and welfare in dogs, and bringing in the human-dog interactions and people side of it, really complex. We're not to be blamed for looking for simple solutions, but we must be aware that if we limit our scope or inclusion of other stakeholders, we may also be limiting the effectiveness of our solutions. And a call that any actions designed should be based on evidence, and do they include metrics and monitoring? Because we hope that in another 10 years we've got a clearer picture on what's working and what's not working, what's been most effective. Revisiting our chart of all the stakeholders in dog health and welfare, now let's look at responsibility in terms of the big picture. So up on the right-hand side, of course, we identify the public and individual consumers as responsible for dog ownership and care. And many educational programs have tried to raise awareness and facilitate people being responsible dog owners, learning how to responsibly acquire or rehome pets, and how to find healthy dogs from good sources. Many efforts in that area. How effective? Well, we'll come up with an example in a minute. On the left-hand side, we talk about responsible breeding, which of course we have a lot of expectations for kennel and breed clubs in supporting the production of healthy animals, and that may involve health testing and breeding decisions at an individual mating level, but also stewardship of breeds for their sustainability and preservation in the longer term. Every producer of puppies should also be involved in responsible sourcing and distribution. And of course, our ability to connect with different kinds of producers sometimes limits our efforts. And again, are we hitting the right target group? Now, of course, everyone has responsibility. All the target groups have responsibility beyond the specific examples here. And let's face it, what we're really talking about here is supply and demand. And I would say there's been a little bit of an overemphasis on focusing on the supply side in an effort to force breeders to supply healthy puppies. But as I say, often an overemphasis on kennel and breed clubs that, depending on the country, may supply 5, 10, 20, maybe 30, in a few countries, higher percentages of puppies that are acquired on a yearly basis. And so thinking that breed clubs and kennel clubs, even if they all produce the healthiest puppies, would revolutionize the entire population is probably a little bit overly optimistic. And on the demand side, we probably all believe that demand is what fuels this, but we're challenged to really create this behavior change in the public. So again, we focus more on the supply side. So we do simplify it to the two sides. On the supply side, do kennel clubs and breed clubs have the influence, or they're the greatest proportion of supply? No, they don't. But the worst of the worst are hard to reach, and therefore there's a tendency for programs to be aimed at the people you can find. Not wrong, but may limit the effectiveness. Do we really know also how much dog shows and the dog show world create and influence the demand and desire for specific breeds versus probably a pretty major role of the media and celebrities in guiding what people want? But again, if we could change the demand and have the demand be for healthy puppies, then we would hope that producers would respond. I think sometimes we're a little over optimistic in saying buy from a good breeder and make sure you see the puppy with its mother. I know there's some fantastic efforts at legislation going on in the UK right now, and it'll be interesting to see how they pan out. But I worry sometimes that we have a lack of appreciation for the extent of online purchasing, the extent of other sourcing options, and the creativity of suppliers. And just again, the fact of, are we willing to embrace the fact that if we could eliminate every online source and commercial breeder, we would reduce availability to the public by 70% in many or more in many countries. Are we willing to do that? But we need to look at the complexity in that way. But as long as there's demand, someone will supply it. We've seen this in the pandemic. Even kennel club breeders, many increasing their production of litters. And we can't help but wonder the level of responsibility given urgency, travel restrictions. Did health care tests get done? Not so sure. So another spectrum we have to consider is there's no such thing as good versus bad breeders. Breeders exist on a spectrum, and we have trouble to truly identify quality of breeders and sources, although there are some rehoming groups that are working hard to try and develop some sort of an audit system. But KC breeders shouldn't get an automatic pass that they're all good quality. And there's a health management program in the United States working with medium-sized commercial breeders that has the excellent potential to improve the quality of puppies coming out of those sources. So again, it's complex. There's a spectrum, and we need to be able to differentiate across these groups. Now, if we have an audit, it doesn't necessarily help us if we still left with a demand situation of people wanting what they want when they want it, and that their priorities are looks and personality, and the priority of, oh yes, of course I want a healthy animal from a good breeder, may actually be lower on their priority list than we tend to think. And it all sort of falls apart when they just want what they want when they want it. So we have to deal with the reality of consumer priorities. Another added level of complexity is to consider the level of organization at which you're operating, from the global down through regional, country, and local stakeholder level, because actions at even a local level may influence up the chain, and local stakeholders can benefit from information and understanding the context of their activity in relation to other levels. And on Dog WellNet, we're very keen to have reports of people's experiences, what worked and what didn't work, as we try to increase the tools available for those working at any level. But context is important and sharing is important. It's the message here. And in the reframing document, we'll have lots more specifics on what activities and are at each level and how they can relate with each other. In the last few minutes of the presentation, before we have more discussion, I just want to introduce you to the roadmap concept we're working on. So again, addressing each of these many stakeholder groups and identifying specific actions they can undertake individually that will improve collaboration and collective activities. This is a work in progress. I hope to have further discussions with some of the people on this webinar in the near future, and we don't have time to go through this in detail, but I just want to give some samples of what we hope to include in the roadmap document. There'll be a generic section where we suggest some reflection by each individual and all groups on their attitudes, ethics, and relations with other organizations, and especially how those attitudes form the basis of their actions and promote some specific activities that can be implemented immediately by individuals. And then we're going to go through for each group challenges, potential, and guidance with suggestions on how to evaluate previous work and ongoing work. And talk separately, for example, about breed and kennel clubs, and specifically pedigree and show breeders. But also each of the other stakeholder groups. And a call that we not get too hemmed in by rules and legislation. Of course, this is effective and important, and much progress has been made through this approach, but underlying it and knowing the challenges for enforcement of legislation, it's very important to engage a wider collective set of actions, and that health and welfare isn't determined by the legislation of a country, but by the enforcement of that legislation. And where gaps exist, we need other approaches. So I hope you'll visit us on Dog WellNet and communicate with us moving forward. Let's be sure we move into action, not just talking. Although having said that, we're going to do some more talking. We'll do some more polls and questions and answer. Thank you so much for your attention, and let's keep going. Thanks.
Okay, just one moment. I'm just going to launch the second poll. Okay, you should all be able to see. There's 2 questions here, just with a single answer each. Just to update, we have 45 people responded. Oh, 54. There's now 74, so just keep it open for a little bit longer. We're at 84, just a few more moments and then we'll close it. $87, anybody else want to submit a last one?
I think we can close it.
Yeah, okay. I'll share. Okay, can you see?
So legislation is necessary and likely to be successful was 23%. Likely to be unsuccessful, very small amount, 3%. Likely to produce unintended consequences such as driving, breeding underground. And there was a question in the chat window or the Q&A about that as well for 19%. Too often implemented without adequate consultation, without the metrics to evaluate effectiveness, and inadequate enforcement strategies. And that was the highest at 43%. And a few saying more about politics and appearances. So obviously, I think when you ask this kind of question, people have in their own mind probably a specific, say, legislation they think worked really well. Others are sitting back. Again, I think the UK is more used to animal health legislation than some countries. Working with the dog show community in the United States, I would say the 3% on B would be more like 75%, where they don't appreciate laws about animal issues. So I think it's interesting. The concern about inadequate consultation or unintended consequences, I was going to respond to the comment at the end of the last chat session is about it's really great to have animals to have a voice in a parliament situation, obviously. My concern when I am interpreting legislation from around the world, and I don't want to judge and say this is good and this is bad, but seeing the consequences that come from it, it can be very difficult, I think, for politicians to maintain a big picture view. Very often they have a specific issue that's been brought forward by their constituents or whatever, and they have to narrow it to make the legislation, and it may or may not be in context. And I also see where there's only a limited time and maybe the research isn't done, etc. So I think it's a really challenging situation. But the one thing I personally would say that's true not only of legislation, but is a personal pet peeve probably also partly because I'm a veterinarian epidemiologist, is the lack of metrics. There are so many things that have been done without by everybody, kennel clubs, veterinarians, everybody. There's a plan, there's a project, there's a process, there's an event, there's a lot of work, no metrics where we can say, this is the way it was before, this is the way it was after, this is whether or not it was successful. And so we're left not really knowing, should we do the same thing again or do something different? So I can get on board a little bit with that 43%. Anybody else? We're probably a little short on time, but comments? Yeah, the distribution wildly different than what anybody thought it would be? No? Well, then let's have a quick look at question number 4. Talking about breed-specific legislation. And I can say that when I was first getting into IPFD, it was during a spate of dog biting legislation or dog attack legislation or dangerous breeds legislation. And there was a long period of time where I was aware of, almost on a monthly basis, regions imposing breed-specific legislation and other regions retracting it. And so breed-specific legislation doesn't have the greatest history, partly due to identifying the breeds. But so legislation to reduce ownership of compromised breeds, 14%. A little stronger, 25% in the B category, saying maybe we have to move a little bit from empathy to sharing. More data, and 24% continue with current approach based on a combination of education and enforcement of existing legislation, was 31%, and gentle nudging a little bit lower. So pretty wide distribution there. It does relate to a question that somebody put in the Q&A. If I try and answer this live, I don't know, do people see the question? Anyway, the question was about the role of empathy. And this relates directly to how we handle ownership of compromised breeds. And should we be empathetic? And I will tell you a story of being at a veterinary convention where we were talking about breed-specific issues. And I made a call and said, we have to understand with empathy that people have been breeding these dogs forever. They didn't set out to create any monsters, but challenge has arisen. And so we have to incorporate empathy for their opinion, even if we don't agree with it. And Peter Sando, who is an ethics professor in Copenhagen and loves to take the opposite position of everybody, but I think especially me. Anyway, and of course he came back and said, been there, done that, tried it, it's not working, it's time to move to shaming, just like we did with cigarettes. We went through a process where we tried to educate people, the ones that got it, maybe they quit, then we upped it to a little stronger, started putting pictures of diseased lungs on cigarette packages, etc. Okay, that got through to a few more people. And he says there's a point in education where you will not reach people anymore and you have to take a new tactic. Now, that's just the devil's advocate talking about the two sides of the equation. But I make this point, you know, what consumers think, this is a reality. This is a reality that people have these compromised dogs and people do feel good taking care of sick dogs. And there were a few comments in the chat window about people keeping sick dogs alive longer than they used to out of this feeling, I'm a good dog parent because I do this. And somewhere we have to understand this is the reality. This is the attitude of a lot of people. And again, we're back to the what's okay, not okay. Is there a line? What do we do with that? So I think that comes up in this discussion. And the comment immediately after that was about how people have completely lost their ability to treat a dog as a dog, and instead it's treated as a surrogate child or dressed up in little outfits. And that person is speaking with, I would say, a certain level of outrage. Obviously, a dog is a dog. It should be able to do certain activities. There are other people, many who I have come across, who say, well, so what, I treat it like my child and dressed it up in little outfits. It's a great social support for me. And again, it's a perfect example where we have people on the spectrum from saying, this is sick behavior, this level of attachment to animals, over to people say, oh, this is so beautiful, look at how we relate to our pets. And it's one of the real challenges of dealing with it. And again, what's okay, not okay. If you're from the dog's aspect, you probably think it should be allowed to be a dog. But one of the biggest issues we have in companion animals is, you know, Pekingese people are one example. These dogs are bred to sit on a cushion. That's their job. So they don't really have to breathe that well, and they don't really have to run around, and they don't have to do things. So anyway, it's not really an answer. It's just saying, yes, complex. Somebody else on those issues? Panel weighing in?
I'm cool.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, so just your presentations and answers and discussion points are really excellent. And I guess from a campaigner's point of view, this stuff just goes around your head 24/7. And I think it's worth pointing out, it's very, very easy, and you've said this before, it's very easy to criticize stuff, what's going on, and tell me about it. I've faced, and all the campaigners watching would have encountered criticism all through their campaigning. But for me, a true campaigner provides a solution. And we see so few solutions provided by those who sort of blame and point fingers and criticize. And it's very, very noticeable. And after a while, it becomes a bit boring, actually, because, and this is in terms of collaboration, get on board, scrutinize positively, and work to provide solutions, but don't sit on the sidelines and sort of point and say that's never going to work. Because that's just a waste of energy. So I guess my advice to people criticizing, if you're going to criticize, then provide a better solution, or get on board and work with the people who are committed to helping dogs in that way. It's too easy to sit and criticize.
And what I would add to that, and this relates to social media and what people tolerate on social media, but you hear the people out here, this is terrible for the dogs, and you hear the people out here, who cares, and well, maybe, you know, it's for the people. And I'm always, because I'm a big picture, middle of the road person, how many people are in the middle? Like how many people are out there? There's these loud people here, and there's these loud people here, and it's what Peter said at the beginning. Everybody's voice is important, and we need to know the middle ground. And one of the issues with the brachycephalics and the legislation coming out of various countries, it's going to impact other breeds. And for example, we can't have people say, oh, I don't talk about that because I don't have brachycephalic dogs. But you have dogs, you have a voice, you need to speak up. You need to say, hey, I'm a fan of pedigree dogs, but I'm not a fan of that. Or, as you say, Mark, what's your solution for how you deal with it? Because it's very hard to know how many people are in the middle. And I suppose, and maybe the regulators on the call can say something, regulators and politicians, in my perception, tend to respond to the loudest voices or the most voices. Well, maybe that's good politically. Is it the best for the population? I don't know.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course.
I'm actually in the middle of dealing with the precise question of a dog who is reaching the end of its life. And I'm very concerned that I am not extending that situation because of how I feel about helping my dog Cassie. And this relates also to the whole journey of having a companion animal in our life, and the subject of this whole webinar, the problem is ownership and how one relates to ownership. I believe profoundly that all animals have rights. I believe my dogs have a total right to express themselves as individuals on a totally equal level to me as a human being. And so that is centrally committed for me because I care and I believe in kindness, but I try not to subjectify that to the degree that I use my kindness in a way that it comes back to myself all the time. So what is important, surely, is that we observe our dogs as individuals, see how they develop, and don't impose things on them that make us feel better, if that makes any sense. And that also relates to Pekingese and cushion dogs and dogs that you dress up. I mean, I'm afraid I hate all of that because, you know, we do always suffer from with the problem of mutual consent when we have an important animal in our life, just as we do. It's easier with our partners or our children or our human partners because we can go through a journey of mutual consent. That's why one has to be very, very sensitive to the needs of the dog and start, I believe, from the premise that the dog has rights, that we don't own them, that we share our lives with them, that we are kind to them, that we love them, we listen to them, and we allow them to speak to us, even though our language is different. Sounds a bit fanciful, that, but it's something that I profoundly believe.
Right, and I think you're a person who's really thought about this, and you're very understand where you fit. The problem with some owners is they haven't really thought about it. I mean, one of the things that I would say is that empathy for a human being cannot be used as an excuse to tolerate abuse of an animal.
I agree.
But that said, it's extremely difficult. When I was 24 and starting out as a veterinarian, one of my first cases was a really old couple with a really old dog that desperately needed to be euthanized. This dog was paralyzed, covered in excrement. There was no question in my young, perky mind that this dog needed to be euthanized instantly. I mean, there was just, from the dog's point of view, it was just terrible. But this was a life-changing moment for these people, and they were old, and they were confronting their own mortality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I learned very young that it's easy to say these things, but it's much more difficult in specific instances to put them into practice. And so that's why I say, you have a line. One of the things that we say in the roadmap about looking at your own philosophy, do you have a line? I say, this far and no farther. And there's extra brownie points for everybody who knows who said that. It was Star Trek. But anyway, that you have a line where you go, yes, empathy, I understand other people can do this and this, but no, it can't go past this. But the problem is there's so many different lines, right? So part of collaborative and collective work is to define the lines, or to understand how to at least discuss the lines in different regions and different situations. So, but like I say, but do you want to let being nice to people be bad for dogs? And it's we see examples of it every single day. It's not easy.
Yeah,
not easy.
It isn't easy, and I can sympathize with the elderly people with the dog lying in its own excrement, and believing that their care was being expressed in a constructive way by keeping that dog alive. And we do need to understand ourselves, and that will be true of our lives with human beings as well. we communicate better with human beings if we understand ourselves better. And I just think a simple departure point would be to really deal with this question of dominance and ownership as far as all animals are concerned in our lives. And if we could really deal with that nugget and break that open and understand it ourselves, and understand that we are so lucky to have the love of animals coming back towards us in our lives, it does require, as you say, a lot of self-knowledge and a lot of, again, it will sound fanciful, a lot of deep, real altruism. I think that's what life is.
And then I always come in as this, it's not dissenting, it's just reality, you know, of there's people in other countries who just wouldn't agree with you.
Absolutely, I know. I work with a lot with stray dogs in Eastern Europe and bears in China and orangutans. And it's horrible that, yes, I mean, that conditioning is shocking, but we at least should be to a degree free of that in the Western world, where the demands that are made upon us are possibly at times less rigid politically and socially than they are certainly up to a certain point in Eastern Europe, and certainly in underdeveloped countries.
Yes, and a few developed ones. But what I would say is that why we need different techniques, right? So we can say, in the world of the Peters of the world, this is what will get through to them and help them create a behavior change. In this other world, that technique's not going to work. So we have to be able to tailor our approaches and not think this one size fits all will work.
I agree, Charlie. Absolutely. I wasn't taking a higher moral ground when I was saying any of that.
No, I didn't take it that way at all. But I think that some very well-meaning people can't let go, right? Like, obviously you can, or you couldn't work in developing countries. You'd go nuts if you expected they would be at your level.
Yeah.
So it's part of what we do. And back to Mark, we need solutions. So just one quick plug before we move on. We want to develop this roadmap document that has specifics, that lists questions and points. Think about this. Do this as an individual. If you're in this group, think about that. And we really hope to gain input from people. And we'll be posting that up on DogWell, the first version of it, hopefully by next week. And we'll look for comments and suggestions where people say, well, we need to look at it this way, or what about this? So I think people do need concrete suggestions of next steps. So maybe we're going to talk more about that at the very end, Mark, but I just thought I'd get that in there.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you, Peter, for your thoughts as well. I wanted to move on now to highlight some other guys doing amazing work, who APDAWG are big fans of, and as a collaborator myself and a campaigner myself with Lucy's Law, so it was always the first step to ending puppy farming. Sadly, you know, lockdown, puppies can be delivered, so you don't see the mum. There's a whole new route to market, well, existing route to market from puppies being couriered to the UK. It doesn't involve any licensed premises in this country. So there's another route to market, puppies treated as goods. So they're not seen with their mum. And of course, if you saw the evidence submitted to the EFRA Select Committee last week from me and my amazing team, the government actually deliberately put a loophole in Lucy's Law to allow puppies to be sold without their mum, but that's a nightmare for local authorities to enforce. The reason I say it's the first step is because we're still working on it. We didn't give up, working with amazing committed animal welfare campaigners. Most of you know them all, but we're not giving up, and we're going to keep going, because if we don't, we feel that who else is going to take over? The Lucy's Law campaign took 10 years. Collaboration was essential. We were grassroots campaigners with no resources, apart from really creativity. It involved campaigners, the public, parliamentarians, celebrities like Peter, the media. It was always evidence-based. And one of my tips was always, if you're going to meet a politician and read their Wikipedia, find some sort of common ground. For me, it was often how their football team did in their constituency the weekend before. Petitions, early day motions, rallies, these are all forms of collaboration that are out there, and they're free and everyone has access to. So I wanted to bring in first Dan. Have we got Dan there? Dr. Dan Allen, who most of you will know from Twitter. Let's just see if I can see if everyone's there. Is Dan there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, so Dan, I'm a massive fan of Dan, and Dan's been involved with a campaign called Pet Theft Reform. So I want you to just explain just briefly what that means. You've done 3 100,000 e-petitions. I cannot emphasize how hard that is. I mean, I think I'm the only one who's also done 3, and it's so hard. But you have done it. You've brought this campaign to Westminster. So I want to know from you, Dan. I'm a massive fan of yours, as you know. What are your tips on collaboration and getting things to Westminster? And can you tell everyone the progress that's been made for your campaign, especially most recently?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of knowing about other campaigns, obviously the influence from Lucy's Law, Where's Mum before that, other things like Finn's Law as well, really positive campaigns which have made a massive difference. And they've gone through years of campaigning, years of hard work, and become legislation. That's the kind of inspiration here for Pet Theft Reform. Alongside that, it's working together with the Stolen Missing Pets Alliance. So that's Debbie Matthews of Vets Get Scanning, Jane Hayes of Dog Lost, Richard Jordan of Pet Theft Awareness, and Arnott Wilson of Dog Union. So this was already a campaign which was in motion. It was people have been working on this for a long time. I got together in 2018 with them, sort of offered my hand to collaborate. And the key thing here is about, I suppose, having clear aims and being flexible and positive along the way, which the successful campaigns have been. Pet Theft Reform, what it is? Well, basically, Peter kind of alluded to it when he was talking about the value of animals or pets to us. In terms of the law, if a pet is stolen from us, they're merely seen as property. They're merely seen as an object. So much the same way, if a laptop was stolen, it'd be much like a Labrador. And that's wrong. That's something which should not be. So Pet Theft Reform is about making pet theft into a specific offence, which has access to higher custodial sentences. We've had 3 Pet Theft Reform petitions, 2018, 2019, 2020. Massive team effort, massive public support. Wouldn't have got there without everybody who's been involved. I'm just a very small part of this campaign. The campaign is much bigger than anybody who's involved. And we've been lucky enough to get lots of people to fit with their skills and experience into the campaigns who's offered their support. So also we've got Mark, who has kindly become our patron, the Sampers patron, so they're working. So in terms of, Mark having access to celebrity, to Westminster and so forth, perfect skills for anybody in any organisation or campaign to have on board. We needed legal expertise. We went to Professor John Cooper QC. We brought him into the team. He's been offering free guidance all in the past sort of 2 years. So without him, we wouldn't have had that policy in place. Debbie Matthews obviously has been doing this for a long time. Her knowledge and know-how and perseverance is still there, and we keep on pushing to get this through. We've also had people like obviously Beverly Cuddy, Dogs Today. So in terms of engaging with the public through media, fantastic. Peter has been kindly supporting through Twitter for a very long time as well, since the beginning. Alongside that, we've got MP support. So we've got we've got Gareth Johnson, who supported this from the very beginning, so 6-7 years. We've got Ross Thompson, who was previously an MP, who supported this, through to Tom Hunt, who's the current MP for Ipswich, who's taken this through to the past Pet Theft Reform debate, which basically was looked upon we got an unusual response in that DEFRA were like, well, we don't really want to do very much about this at this stage, but luckily, what we've been doing alongside this is lobbying behind the scenes. So Tom has been working and writing to and having meetings with the Lord Chancellor, so Robert Buckland QC. So what's been happening is, what we want to do is basically change the sentencing guidelines so that if a dog or a cat or a pet is stolen, it's seen as a specific offence which has access to getting higher custodial sentences. At the moment, what's happening, if your pet's worth over £500 or under £500, that influences the category in which you can get a sentence. And generally, if you are sentenced, you get a small fine, maybe suspended sentence. Custodial sentences, no, it doesn't happen. And the important thing here, which we need to think about, which lots of really fascinating things being said in the previous talks, thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about connecting ideas, I suppose, connected thinking. Pet theft reform is connected to Fern's Law, which is about compulsory scanning of microchips. The microchipping system is broken. We need to fix it. It's also linked to puppy farming. So it's linked to banned puppy imports. It's linked to Lucy's Law. All of these things are interconnected. Dogs are stolen because there's a market for them, there's a demand for them. Many end up in puppy farms, increasing the number of puppies. The female dogs are there suffering, breeding again and again and again. We're seeing examples of dogs going missing, being stolen for years. 6 years later, Fern, for example, her purpose had gone. She could breed no more, was abandoned. And luckily, scanned, reunited with the owner. So there is positive things out there. So the key thing about collaboration, I suppose, is just work together, at a grassroots level through to the big charity organisations. If people say no, it's okay. At a later stage, they might say yes. So there's this whole thing about being positive, and it's really difficult in this kind of animal campaigning world, because there's lots of different things going on. There's lots of kind of egos. There's lots of different people want to do different things for different reasons. But of course, in terms of personalities and expertise and experience, all of it's important. Whether it's somebody who has the time to put a Facebook message every single day to promote a campaign, to somebody who can go and shake a hand of an MP to help them, lobby them, to persuade them to change the law. So that's my key thing here in terms of collaboration. Work together, reach out, look back and see what other campaigns there have been previously, acknowledge ones if they've been doing similar things. I know there's a lot of competition in many cases, which can lead to conflict, but it's something whereby if you can somehow find positives to take from this, it's step by step, very small baby steps. Each positive step should be embraced and seen as a good thing. Mark's campaign, been campaigning for 10 years to get Lucy's Law. And many people would have quit after the first year, second year, third year, fourth year. I've been doing the pet theft reform for 3 years, but people like Debbie Matthews have been doing it for over a decade. So it's so important just to persevere, try and be as positive as possible, be polite. Positive campaigns always do better, in my opinion, those which cause lots of conflict, which cause lots of fighting. The public soon gets bored. Politicians don't want to be involved with it. It's something whereby you need to think about who's getting things out of these campaigns. Of course, the animals is the key thing. We're making sure that we can change the ways in which reduce suffering is the main thing here. But obviously, pet theft reform, it's about pets as family. So again, thank you for everybody who has supported this along the way. A bit of an update, which nobody knows apart from Mark, which I only got it late last night through Twitter, and a private message from Tom Hunt. Things are happening behind the scenes. He had a meeting with the Lord Chancellor, Robert Buckland, I think it was yesterday. There will be news coming out in the next few days, either from Tom or from Robert Buckland, to sort of say where we are with this. So, after a debate, when you get to 100,000, fantastic. It doesn't stop there. Work continues behind the scenes. I've been keeping a low profile because I've been working really hard at Keele as a university lecturer. So I haven't been on social media much in the past few months. But behind the scenes, talking to charities, talking to MPs, talking to Mark, talking to other campaigners, collaborating. And it really does work. Collaboration, grassroots campaigns need collaboration. And then you can collaborate with the big charities too. So the more the merrier, basically. That's my new way of looking at this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, and congratulations for the news, which, as you say, you shared with me last night, and it's fantastic. It's progress. And also, I just wanted to say on the Lucy's Law journey, of course, Lisa Cameron, who's sitting there watching, probably going, "What about me?" was absolutely crucial to getting Lucy's Law over the line. And the MP who mentioned Lucy's Law most in Hansard in all parliamentary debates, because she was so determined to get it through on the parliamentary level. And that's also what you need. And Dan's referred to Tom Hunt. For us, Lisa was the key to getting it over the line, because she didn't stop. And to find those committed MPs, parliamentarians, if you're lucky, minister, was absolutely crucial to the success of our campaign. I'm going to bring in now another person I'm a huge fan of. I'm not going to say her name because she's been trolled and the police are involved. But it is the campaign to ban greyhound racing. And you've just formed a coalition. And I wonder how you did that.
Yes, well, it's interesting to hear that 2 people have had 3 petitions reaching 100,000, because we've only just in the last month launched our petition to ban greyhound racing in the UK. And I think we're doing well when I say we're at 15,500 as of tonight. And it's really born out of an earlier APDAWG meeting, the one that we had about greyhound racing and the welfare of racing greyhounds in 2018, which was a highly constructive meeting. And then some of us who are advocates for rescue greyhounds stayed in touch after that meeting, and we watched what happened in the ensuing 2 years. And some of us are involved in rescue at the coalface, so we saw the greyhounds coming off the track, coming out of their trainers' kennels with injuries or anxiety conditions, some of them in perfectly good order but still battling to find a home. And then we also watched the greyhound industry, which is so complex, and it's such an exploitative industry, but I think it's most compelling to say that it started in the UK in 1926, and it was only in 2018 that they started to produce any kind of statistics, which still lack a lot of transparency. And the statistics essentially show injuries, deaths, and what they call retirement. And in the last 3 years worth of stats, 23,600 greyhounds have ceased racing, 2,700 died racing. 668 of those in the last 3 years died on what's known as economic grounds. So that means if a trainer thinks that it's too expensive to treat the injury, which could be something like a broken hock, then the dog could be killed if they can't afford to treat the injury, and that's perfectly legitimate in the rules of racing. And then 706 dogs died on the track in the last 3 years. And those statistics come out, and they don't have any kind of audit statement on them. They don't show the total universe of racers, and that's really just the tip of the iceberg. So after that APDAWG meeting in 2018, we thought kind of enough is enough, and the people who we see to be in a position to do something with the stroke of a pen were showing what we would say is a perceived form of apathy. So we said, right, let's form our own alliance. And it's 6 campaign groups, and we launched the petition on the 31st of October, which was the day of the Greyhound Derby this year. So the greyhounds that night were racing in freezing wet weather, and we said, you know, we'll work then through the next 6 months to make this petition a success. So in terms of collaboration, I guess it's fair to say that the Alliance is just finding its feet, but we've all been involved in various initiatives which are either dog welfare or greyhound specific over about the last 20 years. And when we were forming the group, we said, well, you know, what sort of qualities do we need? And passion was one, and that's probably our driving force at the moment. But there are other qualities, you know, when you look at these initiatives, and I think it's okay for me to say it because I'm female, but you observe many strong women in these types of groups, and you think, well, if that's well managed, it can be highly productive. If it's not well managed, it can be counterproductive. But we agreed with us, and in fact we're a mixed bunch, that we would be tough on the issues and we would have healthy debate. We may not always agree, but in order to do the right thing by the dogs, we would have a very lively debate and make the right decisions, always with the dogs front and centre. And another quality we expect from the group in terms of productive collaboration would be listening skills. And I think Dr Bonnett, you mentioned that. Really important to spend less time talking and more time listening, because then you move to sort of actionable levels. I think another feature, you mentioned the trolling that we've experienced, is courage. So we're coming up against some pretty vociferous reactions from people who have a lot to lose if this industry goes. So we need the courage of our convictions really to keep going and not get to that point on Dr Bonnett's wheel, which shows a relapse, and you know, you may think of throwing in the towel. And certainly I think between us, we all have the tenacity to keep collaborating for these dogs. We're blessed with a form of international collaboration. We have an Irish group who is part of the group, part of the Alliance, And they probably are up against it more than most, because we all know that 83% of the dogs racing in the UK started their lives in Ireland, and greyhound racing is an enormous industry in Ireland in receipt of government subsidies, and frankly without those subsidies would fail. But then also we have a resource in the form of Grays 2K USA, and they are an international group. They keep their finger on the pulse when it comes to greyhound racing in Australia, Ireland and the UK. And I find the collaboration with them, it goes beyond working together and reaching out and sharing information. It's one of generosity, in my opinion. And I say that because when we talk to them about our parliamentary system or what our next steps might be, or racing in the UK, they know it, they've researched the topic, and they're on the same page. We don't have to do any explaining if we start a conversation with them. They're immediately in step with us. And they could take the position that, you know, we're all sort of little satellites of a very big US group, and they should suck information from us. But it's not like that at all. We can brainstorm with them and feel like they're in the same problem as us, which is hugely helpful when we're just starting this alliance. And particularly when you hit the tough times, you know, they're empathetic, but it's still realistic. They don't put any rose-tinted spectacles on. You know, they say, well, they've passed 18 greyhound protection laws in the States. Racing is banned in 41 states, and it hasn't been easy, and they've made mistakes, but they've also had huge successes. And the Florida tracks closing being one of them. So we've got a leaf to take out of their book. And, you know, we should, as Dan said, learn from the successful campaigns, you know, like the US ones, like Lucy's Law, like Finn's Law. And also, I think a sort of final note from me would be to be open for feedback. So for the successful campaigners I know, it's about the team not being scared to say to them, watch us in action and tell us if you think we should do something differently. What are we doing that's wrong? Or what are we doing that's right and that we could improve slightly? Because I think if you become too introspective, then it's really difficult to move in new directions and find new solutions, and for the collaboration both within the Alliance and with its partners to be successful. And my last word is, please go and sign our petition, because we want to get to 100,000 as well. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, representative of the Alliance. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Go to the government website, sign the petition. We're going to move on quickly to Michelle Clark. Where's Michelle? She should be there somewhere. Michelle, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
You're there. Michelle, thanks for joining us. So Michelle runs an incredible organisation called Dogs on the Streets London, which a lot of you will know about. I want to know from you, Michelle, first of all, what you do, but really importantly, how has COVID and its effect on the homeless community made your job even harder?
Hi, yeah, so Dogs on the Streets is a UK charity where we support rough sleepers, homeless people and the vulnerable who have pet dogs primarily, although we have seen cats as well. We provide free accessible veterinary care, both street ran and also by signposting out to numerous vets around the UK. We also have a sanctuary where we can take dogs into our foster care. We don't do rehoming unless obviously circumstances are beyond like sort of our control. And if the owners need to go in for hospital rehabilitation, or what we're finding more as we're moving forward is the housing situation, where unfortunately we've become a rental world, that private landlords are not accepting dogs into their care. We also provide support to domestic violence for people that are fleeing DV and have a dog, because as we know, if a dog is left in a domestic violence situation, then it's probably 75% chance that that dog will then become the victim. Now, obviously, as we've had an absolute awful year for all of us involved in all sectors, the reason it has been more sort of severe on our side is that throughout the UK, when COVID and we went into lockdown, the sort of councils were decanting the rough sleepers off the streets and putting them back on the original first lockdown into empty hotels, which sadly were not accepting the dogs. Now, the hotels mainly used were Travelodge, and what our argument was is if you were a paying customer in Travelodge, you could pay a small additional charge of £20 and have your dog stay with you. But because obviously the situation where the council had paid X amount of money for these rooms, they were not allowing it. So this put immense pressure on us from day one, where we were having dogs coming in from all over the UK. And then obviously what we were then trying to push for is obviously when they were then being decanted out of the hotels and the hostel accommodation, is obviously not allowing them to go back on the street. So, I mean, we collaborate more with services like the police, London Ambulance Service, and particularly borough councils, because the clients that we deal with have very complex needs. So one way or another, they will somehow be connected with one of the main sort of services and emergency services. So having the collaboration with these people, it makes it easier for us, and also the services, because we represent and we're an advocacy for them. It enables us to stay connected, because unfortunately rough sleepers, as we know, they don't have an address, so they can be on one pavement slab 1 minute and the next minute they can be on the other side of London. So by all of us sort of collaborating together, it's enabling us to sort of keep a check, and also enable us to find out where our clients are with their dogs. Yeah.
Amazing. So just the levels of collaboration that you experience.
I can't hear you, Mark, sorry.
Sorry, the levels of collaboration you go through. So with the homeless, with their dogs, the authorities, the police, the hostels, what are your tips really to help people if they were thinking about collaborating with people? What are your main tips on how to gel everyone together and make some progress?
I think I can't really hear what you're saying. You were very, very mute there. But from what I'm thinking you're saying is, I mean, it's very important, I think, to collaborate with as many people, and not always necessary in the sector that you're working in. I feel, sadly, sometimes I feel it can be very egotistic out there. It's not more about coming together, because I think by coming together, you're actually supporting more, and it's not really about, you know, oh, look what I've done. I'm one for one that just dislikes focus. I'd rather just get out there, get on, do what I've got to do. And I can reach out to the right people that want to do it for the right reasons, not for sort of social media campaigning as such as this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And I do feel, sadly, the Dogs on the Streets was one of the first UK charities to launch in what we do, which is the free vet care on the streets, the sanctuary care, the foster care, and a whole package for our rough sleeping community and also our vulnerable community. So it's, you know, it's very hard for us to reach out and reach up to anybody, because we were the main ones that originally started. I mean, yes, people are branching out off us now of what we do, but we're still very much classed as the main charity in the UK. But I look, you know, I'm always interested in outside opinions on how we could do better, or how we can change, or what we can do to expand. But we are a very small charity, and the reason we keep it very small is that I have worked with rough sleepers and in this field now for 8 years, and it's, again, with our clients, you know, familiar faces, trust, you know, building bridges is vital. When you have too many people, it becomes very kind of tick boxing. And I think what it is we're 24/7, because I always believe that homelessness isn't 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Homelessness is 24/7. So we're accessible to the homeless community. So again, you know, we've got wonderful patrons like Peter Egan, Pete Wicks, and we've got our ambassadors. And hi, Pete. And, you know, even a simple retweet, that will be retweeted. And normally from that, we will get somebody to say, reach out to us and say, hey, what can we do to help you? And there's always an area somebody can help us with. So I really think it's important that we work together. By working together, it solves, or not even solves even, it just makes the problem a lot easier. I mean, we haven't got to the point of doing any petitions yet, but hopefully next year things will change.
That's amazing, and I think, I mean, knowing you all very, very well, I just know that everything...
Am I the only one having trouble hearing you, Mark?
Well, people would be jealous of you if you were. But I know that, obviously I know you personally, and everything is driven by empathy. Empathy and compassion and kindness drives everybody who's been talking tonight. And I think that is the common theme that Peter alluded to right at the beginning. And I think also anyone can campaign and anyone can collaborate. You don't need a background in campaigning or politics or law. Brenda, I wanted to bring the award forward, and then we'll do the summary afterwards. If everyone could just stay online. Philippa Robinson, the Philippa Robinson Dog Welfare Award we present every year. 2 years ago went to Owen and Hatchie, last year went to Eileen Jones from Friends of Animal Wales. Philippa Robinson was actually part of the original Lucy's Law team when we all met back in 2013. She was a phenomenal collaborator, and this is really important today, that not only are we awarding the next person for the award, but Dr. Brenda Bonnett actually campaigned and worked with her. So I'm going to pass over to Brenda, who's going to say a few words.
And I hope people can hear me. I met Philippa first at one of the International Dog Health workshops, and she introduced herself to me as an educator. And together with her colleague Ian Seath, they developed the Dog Ed platform, and that's still going today. Her interests and abilities and vision, however, went far beyond just sharing information. She sought to engender behavior change and have action among dog breeders and breed clubs, and she created the Carlton Index to promote and to lead. And she really understood the need to bring people together. And where would the world of dogs, or our world in general, be without people like her, without the selfless, committed individuals like Philippa, and like the three people we've just heard from, of very inspiring stories of commitment and passion and making a difference. This award is named in Philippa's honor, to recognize others who epitomize this devotion to health and welfare of both dogs and humans. This year's recipient of the Philippa Robinson Dog Welfare Award started a voluntarily run and not-for-profit charity dedicated to the welfare of dogs belonging to UK's homeless community, who prior to the launch of her organization back in 2016 had already been running a street outreach program for 6 years, tending to the needs of the homeless with dogs, and she steadily built up a strong rapport and depth of knowledge for their true needs. Fast forward to 2020, and DOTS operates weekly in London, as well as running regular service in other major UK cities with a view to expand even further. With a fully equipped mobile veterinary surgery vehicle allowing ease of access to dogs in need, DOTS ensures every essential item and service is provided for free each and every week, from food provisions to new harnesses, leads, training, and grooming sessions. So I don't think she can hear me, but Michelle has been involved in a number of cases where she's been successful in getting homeless people and their dogs off the streets for good, and hopes to do more of this in the future, because as the winner says herself, everybody, human or canine, deserves a roof over their heads. So it's my honor to announce that Michelle Clark from Dogs on the Streets is this year's thoroughly deserving winner of the Philippa Robinson Dog Welfare Award. And Michelle, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I don't think she heard any of that. Okay, we're getting thumbs up. Congratulations, Michelle, and to everybody else who is doing such important work.
Well done, Michelle, the winner, 2020 winner of the Philippa Robinson Award. And as I say, she was a phenomenal collaborator and one of the initial team who, back in 2013, started the ball rolling in the parliamentary side. So congratulations, well deserved. We're all massive fans of you, and what you do for dogs and humans. Just the collaboration involved in that alone is just mind-blowing. So I'm proud to be a supporter, and I'm sure everyone watching is as well. Peter's nodding his head. So we're going to move on quickly because I know we're running out of time and have slightly gone over. Brenda, if you wanted to sort of start wrapping things up, and also Lisa, I'm keen to hear your thoughts about, from a parliamentarian's point of view, are we all on the same right page, or is there more that we could be doing?
I think people have heard enough from me in the effort of time. I'll just thank everybody for all their good work, and I hope we can collaborate more through DogWellNet, through connections, very open to sharing your stories and helping get the message out and working on collaboration. And probably some of the people have left because they're so drunk now, because we said that many times.
Nice callback. Lisa, tell us your thoughts on collaboration and what it's like from your side of the fence, being an MP.
Dog welfare, animal welfare is one of the most inspirational things that you can work on in Parliament, because it really does harness cross-party support, and you can have so many divides across the parties on other issues, but we have so much in common in terms of nations across the UK being nations of animal lovers, and I think particularly in the UK Parliament, that is something that I find we can agree on, and that we can all get behind across party. And when you can do that across party, then there's so much more progress can be made on these issues. It's also very heartening, I think. I just want to say congratulations again to Michelle. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing, particularly during COVID. You're working with the most vulnerable, those people who are homeless, but also their dogs, and sometimes cats too. So thank you again. I can't tell you how much we appreciate the work that you're doing, and to all of the other collaborators too. Animal welfare and this APPG has been inspirational. I always find it very motivational and upbeat when I come. Quite emotive too, I have to say, and it's just, I'm really proud and privileged to chair this group and to hear and be involved with so many excellent campaigners who really have compassion at their heart, and compassion for humans and for animals. So I want to thank you, because you always make my year at APDAWG in terms of the work that we do in Parliament and the achievements we have. So thank you for being such great collaborators with us parliamentarians.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And yeah, I mean, we all can collectively thank you for all your unbelievable hard work behind the scenes in getting these campaigns in front of other cross-party MPs, and the catchphrase "making progress," because you are certainly one of the drivers of the animal welfare world within that place, within Westminster. And yeah, we all can't thank you enough. You're the conduit really to making change happen. And as grassroots campaigners who don't have the budgets and don't have necessarily all the time and the connections, for a compassionate, kind MP to listen to campaigners and then to act on what we are trying to drive forward, it means the world to us. We couldn't really do it without people like you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll wrap up. I just want to say, obviously, thanks to Lisa and also her assistants, Roberta and Jane behind the scenes, for helping make this happen. To Dr. Brenda Bonnett, who was meant to be in the middle of a snowstorm, but thankfully that didn't arrive at the extremes that we expected or feared. Thanks for your presentations, thanks for your incredible work, and I obviously urge everyone, you've got the APDAWG newsletter, go to the website, find out more, follow them on Twitter, to our amazing patron Peter Egan for all he does for all animals, not just dogs, and he's always got time and he's always helping. And imagine if everyone was like that, especially celebrities with big followings. Again, for grassroots campaigners, people like Peter are just essential, really, to make some progress. Our Dogs newspaper, who we originally met Dr. Brenda Bonnett in, thanks to them, thanks to Adam and Ali and Vince from there. Tiffany and Paula, just amazing, from the UK Centre of Animal Law. Amazing, always there to collaborate with. Again, collaborate, keep doing those shots. To Dan, to the representative of the Greyhound Alliance, and to obviously the Michelle Clark, well done, congratulations, all that positive stuff as well. It's a pleasure to, on a personal level, to collaborate with all of you. And thanks for everyone for attending tonight, for giving up your time, for signing and sharing petitions. Again, we depend on that as grassroots campaigners. I really hope that maybe some of you have been inspired tonight to start your own campaigns, or reach out and maybe join other campaigns, offer your support, collaborate. The recording of the whole event will be posted, so don't worry about that. It's not the Boothroyd room that we're used to in Portcullis House. We are online. It's been incredible to share this evening with you, and also to compromise and put on an event. And hopefully we'll be back in the House of Commons soon. But we are now planning more events to be online, because thanks to Tiffany and Paula from UK Centre for Animal Law, we can do it. I'm such a technophobe, I wouldn't know how to do this. So I can't thank them enough. Follow APDAWG on Twitter, APDAWG1. Obviously go to our website, sign up to our newsletter if you haven't already, and for updates and newsletters that I love writing, and thanks for the positive feedback. Have a safe and happy Christmas and a healthy new year. Let's keep making progress. Let's keep campaigning. Let's keep improving the lives of pets and humans. And you can do it wherever you are in the world. And we've seen that today, from Canada to Scotland, to the rest of the UK. We all have a responsibility, and we all, someone mentioned it, just to retweet something, just to share something on social media can make all the difference. You don't have to lead a campaign. You don't have to change law. You don't have to raise awareness publicly. You can all do something as simple as a retweet or a share on Facebook, especially with a petition, sign and share, and you will be part of the solution. You will be part of change, and you'll be part of protecting the animals well into the future. So I can't thank everyone enough for supporting APDAWG, for everyone who's been involved tonight speaking, to Brenda in Canada for amazing to make it international, and for everyone to join together, to collaborate, and move forward into the new year with this extra energy to change stuff positively for the animals, not just dogs, but for all animals. So thanks again from the bottom of my heart, from Lisa, who's our chair, from Peter, who's our patron, and we'll see you soon, maybe for the next online event in January.
Mark.
Yes, Peter.
Can I just say one quick thing before we close down?
Of course, yeah, you can have the final word like Jerry Springer.
We should all say a huge thank you to you, Mark, because you're absolutely brilliant. You're an amazing force of nature, and I'm delighted to know you and be your friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's much appreciated and reciprocated, whatever the word is, you know what I mean? But we're all fans of everyone, and that's how you move forward. You support people, and you provide solutions, and you just get on with it. So enough with the trolls, enough with the negativity. Let's move forward and make some changes. It's up to us to protect the animals. Cliche, we are their voice, but it is so true, and we have the tools to do it. So let's just get on with it, and we'll see you next year. Thanks, everyone.